Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where the gnomes live. This is Sharon Oyella and this is part 3 of our vintage suitcase turned dollhouse. In parts 1 and 2 we did a lot of work on the house. We lit it up, we added windows, we added floors on the one side. So this is part 3. In this part we're going to be adding these two floors here. So just on the lid side, okay? If you missed part 1 and 2, those links will be in the pinned comment below. Before we get started, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you can look at the end of my floor here, there is a little bit of a warp there. It doesn't bother me, but if that little bit of a warp is going to bother you, then please check out video 2 and look for how to build the warp-free floor, okay? I think this one turned out really good. I just added the brace underneath, as you can see, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And this is about 3 3/4 inches wide. Now you could go a little bit wider now that we know how to fix that warping issue, but that's up to you. I thought this was enough space since we have the inside of the case with floors. Okay, and so what we have to do when we install this floor is we have to add a brace underneath it, and then we also have to make a little notch on the side because when you close the lid, it's going to have to close around those lights and the twine that I added there. So whatever kind of wall you added in front of your lights, you have to take into consideration how much of a notch you make into your cardboard. And then on the other side, I had already added twine, but it was hitting that twine, so I had to fix that as well. So we're going to do that in the next clip. So I took one piece of cardboard. This is not sandwiched with another one yet. This is just one piece of cardboard because I'm just figuring out how it's going to fit in there, and I have to figure out what I have to do to make it fit, how to make it slide in when I close the lid. And like I said, the twine was in the way, so I had to cut a little notch out of the twine. And of course, looking back on it now, I wouldn't have added that twine until I had this floor in. But like I said in the very beginning, I was just figuring things out as I went along, and my design plans kept changing. Okay, so I just want to save you guys a little bit of time. So now that I had that notch figured out, I could sandwich my cardboard with another piece like I showed you in part 1 and 2, and then add the sticks. And I'm just going to double check before I do anything else to make sure it's going to slide in there. And it does, it works perfectly, so I'm ready to install it. So you have to figure out your own measurements there as well, guys, because you want that beneath the other floor, of course. So I used my level and I drew a line and I made a little brace here. This is 3 pieces of cardboard sandwiched together, and I had to angle it so it would sit underneath the floor and also on the lid of the suitcase. Okay, now that I know that that line is level, I'm going to use hot glue to attach this. Before I let that hot glue cool down, I'm just going to put a piece of twine in there so it'll dry or cool down together with the twine stuck in there, and that acts like a little brace while I get this other piece attached. And I'm only using hot glue as a second pair of hands to hold things in place for me until I can get the permanent glue on there. You never want to build with just hot glue because eventually with temperature change the hot glue could let go. And now I'm checking to make sure it's level again. And now I've flipped it upside down and I could add my book pages underneath. And again, like I showed you in part 1, you want to make sure that you're wrapping around the corners just like that, because once the paper is dry, that floor is now one solid piece with the lid. And again, because we are working with cardboard, we want this to dry as fast as possible. So I do help it with the hairdryer, and I do keep the fan on it as well. And then I added the twine around the edge. So in the back, I had a little bit of a gap between the wall and my suitcase wall. So I'm just putting in a piece of thin twine, and it actually fit perfectly behind there because you don't want that to be a dirt trap, okay? So once that was in there, then I added, instead of doing baseboards on this side, I did another piece of twine right over top. So tacky glue along the top edge and then twine right into that tacky glue. Once this is dry, again, everything is so solid. For my bottom fold-out floor, this changed design a couple of times. So this is the very first one. I had a very small floor there, and I had already hinged it, and I drew my line, and I was going to install it just like I did on the top floor there. But as you know, I later changed my mind, and I cut off the front part, and now I'm adding the larger floor that we made together in part 2. And now I'm going to install it. Okay, so let's look at the measurements before we install this. Okay, so the most important part right now is the top piece, okay? Because the bottom one is going to have to fit underneath it. And even though this is the depth, I'm going to call it the width, okay? So it's 1.5 inches wide, and I couldn't make it any wider because when I close the case, the edge of it is going to hit my storage compartment. Okay, they're going to meet up together. And then the other thing that will determine the size of your floor is how high you put the first piece, okay? Because that floor has to fit underneath it, right underneath it. You can see here, when I push it in, it's flush, okay? The top of my floor is flush with the edge of the first piece. So you can see when I pull out my floor, I have to pull it out from underneath a little bit. And that's why I used a fabric hinge, because it gives me that flexibility. And that hinge goes from edge to edge, okay? So when I push it in, the fabric goes out of the way and I can push the floor all the way in. And when I pull it out, it sits flush with that top piece. Okay, we are going to install this together. I'm just showing you how it works. I have a little brace here. I did make a little compartment for the brace where it can slide and store away when I'm not using the floor. Alright, so let's pretend that first piece does not have a hinge attached to it yet, and we're just going to install it like we installed the floor above it. Okay, I'm going to use a piece of twine and hot glue. So I'll run a bead of hot glue. Of course, I checked the levelness of that line, and that floor I already know is going to fit underneath the other floor in front of it when I close the lid. Okay, bead of hot glue, and then I'll put my twine inside that glue, and then I did add the book pages underneath it, just like I did with the floor above it. Alright, so the case is turned upside down and I'm putting on a thin, even layer of tacky glue. I'm just going to get this on here and then I'm going to spread it out with a piece of cardboard, making sure to spread that glue right to the very edge of this piece, the front edge. Now I'll place my hinge on there. Make sure you have the floor turned the right way, of course. And then with my finger, I'm going to pull this hinge tight, because you want this floor to be sitting flush, and you can already see a piece of cardboard underneath there I'm using as a brace. So I'm pulling this hinge across with my finger, pulling that floor right up against the first piece. So you can see under here, you should see a flush floor. There shouldn't be any gaps or any jumps in this floor. It should be going straight right across. And then I'll leave this sit here like this for about 20 minutes, a half an hour. Leave it sit, and then flip it right side up. And then you'll notice that it'll be sitting out a ways, something like this. And that's okay. Push it in. Just push it in so the floor is flush with the piece above it. And then leave that for an hour or so. And then after an hour or so, come back and check it. And it's going to be very stiff, but that's okay. Then you just pull it floor out and wiggle it back and forth until you can freely move it. And then you should find that when you pull it up, it sits flush with the floor it's attached to. Okay, so now we're going to make the little brace and the compartment for the brace. So my brace is just 3 pieces of cardboard that I cut down and then glued together, and I added a little piece at the bottom to make it wider on one end, covered it all in book pages, and then you can see here, this is just twine. This is a twine wall that I built just so it has something to slide into when I'm placing it on the floor. So now let's make the sleeve for the brace. Alright, so I'm using a thin piece of cardboard. I'm going to place my brace on top, right in the middle, and then I'm going to score each side with my X-Acto blade. Scoring means you don't go all the way through. Okay, and those should snap down, and that's the first part done. Now we're going to flip it over, and now we need to score the side of the brace. Okay, so each side gets scored. And of course those pop out the opposite direction as the ones that we first did. Okay, so now we have a little sleeve for our brace. And that should slide in there fairly easy. So let's attach this to the suitcase. I had to cut the edges down so it would fit in there, and now I'm attaching it with tacky glue. And then you want to test it out to make sure the brace can slide in and out fairly easy. And then hold that position and add a piece of masking tape on all 4 corners. And then of course test out your brace again, make sure it can slide in and out fairly easy, and let that set for about 20 minutes. Once it's set, you can remove the masking tape, and then I would add book pages. You don't have to. I'm going to do that because it's going to ensure that this sleeve will always stay put and it won't get weak or worn out over time. I'm actually really happy with how this turned out, and store away and keep it in a safe place when I'm not using it. Alright, and I didn't show previously that I did touch up some of the suitcase with a little bit of black paint on the inside of the lid. So you can see some of the white stuff along the black wall there. I don't know what that is, and I couldn't wash it off. So I thought I would just cover it up with black paint, and that worked well. And then once I had that all covered up, then I did add my twine around the edges of the book paper, just to clean up that book paper edge. I'm really happy with that twine. I like the rustic look of it and how easy it was to install. And I was able to clean up all those uneven edges fairly easy. In the next video, we're going to make the curtains. We're going to build a fireplace, and most likely we'll install the stairs in the same video. Remember guys, there are links in the pinned comment below if you're looking for other parts of this video series. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.